Hey guys, I got a good one for you today. When thinking about the past and the sparse and eclectic Godzilla products that were available to us who lived through the late 70s and the decade of the 80s, one item comes to mind. It was 1989, and my middle brother had an NES in his possession for a few years now. Nearby, where we lived, was a small store that sold video games, which I frequented, frequently. I had purchased many games for my personal library: Metroid, Metal Gear, and that year, Konami's difficult Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I was enjoying this new video game renaissance that succeeded Atari's reign from earlier in the decade. But never could I have foreseen one game staring back at me from the display glass: Godzilla, Monster of Monsters. As I had expressed in my Before Bandai video, Godzilla merch was difficult to come by, especially the kind that featured his monster foes and not solely the big G. But this game appeared to have some of them included, and I needed to have this cartridge in my library. I didn't care if the game sucked ass. I saw Mothra on the back and I knew some of Godzilla's enemies would be in the game, and the sprites looked big and faithful. How could this go wrong? But I was a kid barely in his first year of high school. I had a paper route, and usually I could finance the purchases I needed, but an NES game was pretty expensive for the time. But Christmas was near, so I knew I had to work that angle. And sure enough, on the holiest of holidays, I received Godzilla, Monster of Monsters, a Toho love letter for the fans of the genre. The game itself is fairly simplistic. You guide both Godzilla and Mothra through several fields that represent planets in our solar system. Each field has a set of enemy Kaiju waiting to confront you as you advance through these fields. As you side-scroll through different terrains rife with a variety of both alien and Earth defense forces, random minor Kaiju like Manda and Dagora, you eventually face that level's bosses. These bosses are a mix of Godzilla's biggest foes, or peripheral Kaiju from the associated films. They, too, advance to meet you, and you must defeat them before clearing the stage. What's curious about these boss fights is the lack of scenery. The screen is completely black, with just you and your opponent on screen. I have a feeling that this game's budget or capabilities was limited, because there are elements accessible through codes that didn't make the cut. Godzilla, beautifully realized by a large sprite for an NES game, is a powerful force as he should be. Since we're talking about classic NES, the controls are simplistic, with only 2 buttons for physical attacks, and the select button for a monster-specific special that requires energy buildup. With Godzilla, you have punching and kicking abilities to fight enemies high and low. Pressing up on the directional pad allows you to jump, while pressing down and pressing the kick button will utilize a tail sweep, useful for those pesky mountains that may block your advancement. Of course, his most notorious offensive capability is his Atomic Blast, which deals the most damage, but can only be used if his energy meter has enough blocks filled. Mothra has a different style. Obviously, she is not a physical fighter. Instead, you are given the ability to fly high and low, which helps in evading certain obstacles. She's equipped with a pellet attack, which looks like Megalon's napalm bombs. These are plentiful and don't require the need for an energy meter. What does, however, is her moth powder that she can emit, and it can cover a fairly good amount of space. Like Godzilla's breath attack, this is very useful against lower opposition and boss monsters. The first stage features 2 monsters I have never been familiar with at that point: Mogera and Gezora. I thought these 2 were made-up villains for the game, until I learned years later that they both came from non-Godzilla Toho films. Mogera, the robot weapon from the film The Mysterians, is a fairly simple opponent. It slides across the screen, occasionally releasing its eye beams at you. But with Godzilla, you could beat him with ease. Just tail swat him. The battles last as they are timed and will stop to give you the opportunity to advance if you wish. Gezora, the giant cuttlefish from the space amoeba, is a bit more frustrating. He hops back and forth, striking you with one tentacle. You can score several hits on him, but if he corners you to the left of the screen, you're pretty much at his mercy as he beats you repeatedly. He's more difficult with Mothra, as you can get grounded by him and unable to use her special attack. Varan, a monster I'd only glimpsed on in Destroy All Monsters and Ian Thorne's Godzilla book, is the next kaiju to oppose you. A sprite as big as Godzilla, he uses his outstretched arms to attack, pushing you back or leaping at you to deal damage. He was an unexpected treat, and it kicked off my need-to-know-more curiosity about this monster. Easier than the previous two, he's both fun to watch and fight against, as there's no frustration to be had. Baragon, one of my future faves, is up next. The villain from Frankenstein Conquers the World uses a combo of his fire beam and leaping attacks as a way to repel you. He changes his posture, like in the films, from on all fours to standing on his hind legs, and is perhaps the most animated of all the villains, occasionally looking around while you beat on him. In a moment of hilarity, he looks right at the player as almost to say, "What the fuck?" Hedorah, the smog monster, is your follow-up opponent, and just like the kaiju himself, his music is creepy. He attacks by lunging out his arms to push you back and project his sludge bullets, which are annoying because they explode with both ranged and close-quarter attacks, making it difficult to get near the monster. Apparently, he was supposed to change into his flying stage too, as there is an additional sprite created that you could see in the credits. But more on that and other things that didn't make the cut later. Gigan comes in hot with his hooks, rotary cutter, and a feature that was never actually seen in the Showa era, his forehead beam. He can immobilize you with his cutter, which is annoying as he pins you to the side. But eventually, like all the foes in this game, you can learn the monster's pattern and be ready for him. Mechagodzilla doesn't feel too difficult, despite his barrage of eye beams and punches. He's strangely energetic compared to his on-screen counterpart, marching quickly at you with obnoxious robotic music playing in the background. Like Gigan, his life bar is pretty extensive, and it will take quite a few turns to ruin his day. King Ghidorah, or just Ghidorah, the final boss, takes some heavy effort and resilience. Set in his flying posture, the three-headed dragon rushes you, while showering your monster with gravity beams and three-way headbutts. He does fast and heavy damage, and you may find yourself beat before you have a chance to make a dent. Since the game permits you to control Mothra and Godzilla alternately, it's a very good idea to have them stationed next to him, taking turns with Monster Zero, so you can whittle away at his ludicrous life bar. The game is loaded with Toho sci-fi lore from the Showa era. Many of your small-scale enemies are composed of the fictional military weaponry like the maser cannons, tanks, zillion saucers, and even the fire dragon, that flaming UFO of the Kilak from Destroy All Monsters itself. From the Gotengo to Godzilla 1985 Super X, from the yet-established Heisei era, it zooms in for an attack cameo. Minor kaiju such as Matango and Dogora fly around taking random hits at your monster, with the former showing up as a large cluster, minor boss of sorts. Manda, the sea kaiju from Atragon, now is a fiery serpent emerging from random volcanoes, spewing fireballs. The stages themselves are sometimes one massive opponent, like the mechanical trench setting not unlike the Death Star run from A New Hope, or the massive Goten from War in Space, which you must destroy little by little as you advance. Combined with random jets and other UAPs, and original kaiju critters, Godzilla and Mothra have their respective claws / wings full while advancing through these various stages. As I had mentioned earlier, Hedorah's flying form shows up in the credits as an unused alternate sprite the monster could use in its offense. While I assume that was the extent of the game's lost material, I couldn't have been so wrong. In recent years, codes have been uncovered in the game's program that revealed both playable sprites of Rodan and Anguirus that were created but never finalized, perhaps due to budget constraints. Other possibilities may have had Mothra's lava form being playable as well, but the prospect that the gameplay could have been even more expansive is titillating. Even the code for just the music reveals the additional song tracks, from Monster Zero included, which does not feature in the game itself. I also recall the announcement of a Rodan game shortly after Monster of Monsters was released. Those of you who have been watching this channel know that Rodan is one of my favorite kaiju, so the prospect of this game was both unbelievable and exciting. Alas, unbelievable it was, as it was never developed, and all that remains is an ad that was packed in the Monster of Monsters box. Imagine a world where Godzilla's co-stars could headline in their own 8-bit game. Godzilla Monster of Monsters is a fun button-mashing side-scroller with large, gorgeous sprites, tons of Toho history, Easter eggs, and a fun soundtrack that occasionally pulls an Ifuku-based theme out to suck you into the Showa era of Godzilla and Toho sci-fi. An average gamer may find this money, and it is, without those elements to consider. While there are better Godzilla games, like the fun Destroy All Monsters / Save the Earth / Unleashed trilogy of games by Pipeworks, Monster of Monsters feels authentic by design. It's a true love letter of the genre, and I only wish we had gotten a proper successor rather than the imbalanced and boring Godzilla 2 strategy game. Hell, the Godzilla Game Boy puzzle game is more fun than that piece of shit. If you haven't played Godzilla Monster of Monsters, the euphoria may be dated to this day and age, with many games and platforms featuring the king of the monsters and his fellow kaiju. Before its time, it was the best, and only mass-released Godzilla game available. Have you played or owned Godzilla Monster of Monsters? Still have it? What do you think? Comment down below, and let me know what your all-time favorite Godzilla game is. Thanks again for watching Showa Showcase. I appreciate all of you who have subscribed, and I hope those of you who haven't decided will join us. I have many more Godzilla videos in the works. Until next time.